The moment the real estate agent unlocked the front door and smiled confidently, completely unaware that every single person who walked through that house that day would walk right back out, I knew we'd already won. And if you've ever been powerless while someone richer, greedier, and more entitled tried to crush you just because they could, then sit back, because this is one of the most satisfying reverse-gazumping revenge stories you'll ever hear. And trust me, karma didn't just knock this time. It kicked the door in. If stories where ordinary people outsmart greedy landlords make your blood pump, hit like, subscribe, and brace yourself, because this all started 15 years ago with a struggling family, 5 kids, and a promise that died with the wrong person at the wrong time, because my best friend and her husband were doing everything right. They lived in one of the most expensive cities around, raising 5 children on a tight budget, renting a crumbling 4-bedroom house for $400 a week, which might sound cheap today, but back then was painfully high, especially for a place with a revolting kitchen. Drains that constantly stand, like rot peeling wallpaper, and a general feeling that the house itself had given up on life. But they made it work, because when you're a parent, you don't get the luxury of quitting. You just adapt. And the only reason they held on was because the owner, a sweet elderly woman who was staggeringly wealthy, genuinely liked them. She saw how hard they worked, how well they cared for the house despite its flaws. And she made them a promise that changed everything. She froze the rent for 5 full years and told them that when they were ready, when they'd saved enough to get a loan, she'd sell them the house for a fair price. And this wasn't some empty comfort lie. She'd done it before, helped other families climb out of renting and into ownership. So my friends believed her. They skipped holidays, sold personal belongings, pinched every cent until saving became a reflex. And 5 years later, they finally sat her down and told her they were ready. They were proud, relieved, excited, like people who just reached the top of a mountain after years of climbing. And 2 days later, she died. No contract signed, no paperwork, just a promise hanging in the air like smoke. And that's when everything changed. Because the house didn't pass to one person, it passed to her 4 adult children, all extremely wealthy, all already sitting on a massive portfolio of properties, people who'd never known the kind of fear that comes from wondering where your kids will sleep next month. And at first they played nice. They told my friends not to worry, said the sale would still go through once probate was settled, spoke politely, professionally, just enough kindness to keep hope alive. And trusting them was the worst mistake my friends could have made. Because feeling safe, they started fixing the house, stripping wallpaper, painting walls, planning a future, imagining their kids growing up there, and then probate cleared. The paperwork moved forward, the loan application went in, and the bank rejected it, cold and final, because somewhere along the way the owners had quietly raised the price by $80,000 without telling them. $80,000, just enough to tip the loan from approved to impossible. And as if that wasn't cruel enough, they announced the house would be listed publicly. Open market, open house in 7 days. Knowing full well that prices had recently exploded, and knowing my friends had nowhere else to go because rents had risen everywhere except where they lived. And if they were evicted or forced to pay market rates, they'd never find another 4-bedroom place they could afford. And I still remember the look on my friend's face when she told me that hollow, stunned expression people get when their world collapses, but their body hasn't caught up yet. And something inside me snapped. Not loud anger, not yelling, but the kind of quiet rage that tightens your jaw and sharpens your thinking. Because these people didn't need the money. They were multimillionaires squeezing a struggling family for less than 20 grand each. And it was obvious now that this had always been the plan. Wait for the old woman to pass, then cash in. So while my friends scrambled, begging banks, shifting numbers, trying to stretch reality, I decided that if they wanted to play dirty, I could play smarter, legally, quietly, and devastatingly. So I researched what makes houses sell fast and what scares buyers away without crossing any lines. Because the goal wasn't vandalism, it was vibe destruction. And first we tackled space, because buyers want open, airy rooms. So we did the opposite. We dragged furniture away from walls, added extra chairs, borrowed clutter, hung loud motorcycle memorabilia everywhere, making the house feel cramped, chaotic, and smaller than it really was. Then we attacked smell, because nothing triggers instinctive rejection faster. My friend boiled cabbage until the air turned sour. We sprayed ammonia around doors so it smelled like feral cats had claimed the place. And we poured 2 Then rotten eggs down the drain so every sink whispered sewer gas, the kind of smell that sticks to your throat. Then we worked on curb appeal, or rather the lack of it, placing a moldy, disgusting couch on the neighbor's lawn across the street with permission. Instantly, making the whole area look rough, neglected, unsafe. And finally, we called in favors. Every mate with a loud, unreliable car was told to drive past repeatedly during the open house. Engines roaring, stereos rattling, turning the street into rush hour chaos. And then came the final masterpiece, the rugby club. Massive men, full contact players built like brick walls, leather jackets, bikes rumbling, gathering next door for a front yard barbecue with free food and cheap beer, laughing loudly, filling the street with presents. The kind that makes buyers suddenly worry about noise complaints and parking wars. And when the open house began, people came curious, hopeful, and left almost immediately, faces tight, noses wrinkled. One woman didn't even exit her car, just watched the crowd next door and drove off. And the one brave guy who stayed long enough to ask questions sealed his own fate when he chatted with someone from the party who casually mentioned that these gatherings happened all the time. And oh yeah, the drains here are always backing up because of tree roots. Smells awful. And that was it. He left, offerless. And by the end of the day, my friends were the only bidders, forced to pay more than planned, but nowhere near what the greedy owners wanted. They signed the contract, paid the deposit immediately, locking it in, and when another buyer finally came forward, offering $30,000 more, the owners couldn't do a thing thanks to strict anti-gazumping laws. And I would give a lot to see their faces when they realized they'd been outplayed at their own game. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from courts or contracts. Sometimes it comes from people refusing to be quietly crushed. And if there's one thing I learned that day, it's that greed collapses under its own weight when it meets unity, creativity, and just enough righteous anger to push back. And if this story hits something deep in you, if you've ever watched powerful people try to take what little someone else has, then you already know why this revenge felt so damn good. So smash that like button, tell us in the comments what the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen was, and subscribe, because karma has a long memory and we've got plenty more stories where it finally collects.